Hello, and welcome to the Tips with Toni podcast. I'm Toni Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. I'm very excited for our next guest. I have Mike Millner virtually in front of me. He is a nutrition coach, podcast host, and author of The Personality Diet. And we are going to geek out on nutrition and the science behind it, but then also real world application, which you guys know is at the heart of why we do what we do, and our behavior is what matters the most. So I'm super excited to have Mike on the podcast. Mike, welcome.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You're so welcome. I'm so excited to have you. I've been following you for quite a while. We share very similar philosophies. I have a feeling this conversation is going to be incredible. So I'm super excited today. Before we jump into the meat of the conversation, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself by sharing who you are, what you do, and most importantly, why you do what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mike Millner, I own Peak Optimization Performance, or POP for short. It's a nutrition coaching company, actually named after my grandfather, who was a huge mentor in my life. So we called him Pop. So I wanted to name my company Pop in his honor. He
Oh
passed
my
away
gosh.
right before I started my business. So he was somebody that impacted so many people. I call it the ripple effect. Like, he impacted so many people that then impacted other people, and the ripples carried on. So that is, I'll jump right into the why I do what I do. That's why I do it. And I've been in the industry for a little over 10 years. I started as a personal trainer, found my own passion in nutrition, really because that was like the sticking point for me. I was somebody who started out as an athlete and then went to college and then picked up a lot of college type behaviors and kept those behaviors going well after sports ended. So I went from never having to think about food, my body, what I ate, how I looked, to all of a sudden waking up one day feeling like overnight I morphed into this unrecognizable person. And I was 250 pounds, and the weight itself was one thing. It was more so my identity, because I was an athlete. That's how I
Right.
identified myself. That's how I made friends and connected with people. And all of that was now gone. And I didn't want to see people that I hadn't seen in a while because I was afraid of the comments they'd make. And that led me to doing things all the wrong ways, thinking that I couldn't be myself again until I got all the weight off. So I started doing hours of cardio, restricting my nutrition, eating 1,200 calories a day, all the typical stuff that, we hear and experience and see others experience. And led me down the path of chronic dieting, restricting and binging. A very long-winded journey that kind of took a lot of different turns, and eventually I crawled out of that hole. And one of the things that I noticed was that I was certainly not the only one that was struggling with restrictive eating and body dysmorphia, and I had orthorexia and just all of these things that really took a toll on my relationships, my sense of well-being,
Mhm.
really just my life in general. So that was my motivation to learn everything that I possibly could about nutrition and be able to pay it forward. And that is kind of the condensed version of how it all came to be.
Yeah, it's like you read my bio, like pre-bio, like before, the fancy bio, what people hear, like what, like my life. I thank you so much for your vulnerability. And also I love that you identify as male, because I don't think enough men speak up about this, about orthorexia, about body dysmorphia, about binge restrict, like that whole cycle. It's so vicious. And I'm guilty of it, because my main clientele is women, and that's who I market towards, right? And that's who, I identify with the most, because that's how I identify, right? So but it's important to think to have male figures speak out about this as well. And so I really appreciate you not only, talking about it, but now helping people with it. I think it's really necessary. I'm sure you probably work with a lot of men, because you're open about your story.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because I do feel like so our most of our clients are actually women. We do have a number of men that we work with, but I think, to your point, it's just, maybe it's a pride thing, maybe it's an ego thing, but I think
Mm-hmm.
for men it's like, well, I don't want to admit that I
Yeah.
have these issues. And the men that are in our community, feel the same way. Like, they struggled with a lot of the same things and even still do. It's just, maybe it's they don't want to admit it, or they don't feel
Mm-hmm.
comfortable sharing, or it's like the societal way of thinking that it's like not masculine, for whatever that means, to
Mm.
share your emotions or whatever. And I think that the more that we talk about it, the more that I share my story, I'm hoping that it gives other people just permission or feeling comfortable to open up and say like, yes, this is what I'm struggling with, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Because it's better to kind of face it and meet it head on than to continue to try to suppress it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And that never leads anywhere good. Just big blow ups, some hot messes when you suppress your feelings and don't deal with them. Don't advise it. But so I'm curious from you, like as you started, there was that certain point where you realized like what you were doing wasn't working and it was really more frustrating than it was helpful. And then something had shifted for you. You kind of got saturated with kind of like guided more towards information that was more helpful. How did you assess what worked for you? Because I know that what you help people with is like figuring out their personalities and dealing with their nutrition. And so what worked for you, we know that what works for you doesn't work, is not going to work for me. But like, I am curious a little bit more before we talk about like how other people can kind of figure out what works for them. Like what were maybe either like signs or messages or things that you started to recognize like, oh, you know what, this actually feels much better than what I was doing before?
Yeah, definitely. It's a great question. There's really two, I would say, pivotal moments in my journey that happened. The first was when I was going through my own process of chronic dieting, restrictive eating. Actually, my very first diet was around 1,200 calories. I found it in the back of a cardio manual. I bought this like cardio machine, put it in my apartment. I was like, I'm just going to do hours of this and I'm going to eat as little as possible. And I was like flipping through, and the back very last page was like a meal plan. It was like, just follow this meal plan. And like their whole thing was like, drink freezing cold water all throughout the day because it's going to kick your metabolism into
Oh my
high gear.
God.
It's just
Was there lemon in it? Just freezing cold, no lemon?
oh,
That's not gonna work.
no, so, and then, obviously I would lose a bunch of weight, I would gain it all back. And then I'd be like, oh, there's something wrong with me. Why couldn't I just stick with it? And I would always blame myself. And then I would find the next thing. And then I would find the next thing. And I would just rinse and repeat that same process. And never once did it occur to me, like, maybe it's the vehicle that's the issue. Maybe it's not myself, but I had no awareness at the time. Then the first like pivotal moment, I started to strength train. Like I found this local place near me that was like a very kind of boutique gym that they were all about strength training. And I was in this like cardio cycle, even though I hated cardio, I just thought that's what I needed to do. So once I found strength training, that was the first like empowering moment of like, okay, this is way more fun. I can actually focus on getting stronger and I can see improvements. Like, last week I was using 40-pound dumbbells and this week I'm using 50-pound, whatever. The problem was that gym also ran 6-week challenges that were very restrictive. And it was, kind of the same story. And this was the first like aha moment when I was like, maybe it's not me, because every single person that would do the challenge, and I did the challenge as well. I did my 6 weeks. I lost a bunch of weight, gained it all back. And then the next challenge would come up and it'd be the same group of people back at the same starting point. And I was like, okay, this is not adding up, because if we are all back at square one after going through this 6-week challenge, something is not right. And it's okay if like I can handle my own struggles, but when I'm seeing other people struggling with the same thing, that was like the first red flag. Like maybe this isn't the best path. So I have an obsessive personality. I was like, I'm going to figure this out. So I just like poured myself into research. I started getting certified. It's like, I need to crack the nutrition code. Fortunately, I cracked the code in all the wrong ways, which was everything that I was learning and reading was all about calories in versus calories out, energy balance, just hit your macros and everything will be fine. And so that was my philosophy for a while. It was very much if it fits your macros, just understand energy balance and you'll be good. And probably the worst thing that happened to me, like my very first client that I got, I like gave her a macro prescription and she got so lean quickly and it was like hyper responder. And I was like, oh, this is so easy. You just give the macro plan and everybody gets results. And then a bunch of other women at the gym were like, oh, you have to do my nutrition. So I started giving out more macro plans, but the results weren't the same. So I noticed people struggling. And I started working for another company as a nutrition coach, and they were very macro based. It was like, we give the macros. If the person's hitting them, we tell them, good job, keep doing your thing. If they're not, we tell them, hit your macros and get back to us. And like, that was the only coaching that existed. And once again, once I start to notice a pattern of lots of people are struggling and the company line is just like, do better. And of course, they're going to internalize that. Like, I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not disciplined enough. I don't have enough willpower. And really it was like, all right, this doesn't make sense either. So that was the second pivotal moment where psychology has always been a passion of mine. And that was like, once I started talking more in depth with each client, even though this was like a massive company that had like tens of thousands of people, so it was really difficult to have the one-on-one interaction, but I would just start asking more questions. And what I started to realize was that it was really all a mindset thing. It was the feelings that they were having, the restrictiveness, the perfectionist tendencies, the dichotomous thinking around food, the all or nothing mindset, and all of that started to just like be a recurring theme. So that was the next shift where I was like, we're missing something here. We talk all day about metabolism, physiology, energy balance, and nobody is addressing the most important thing, which is what's going on between your ears and the thoughts you're having, your perceptions, beliefs. All of that has to
Yes.
come into play first. So that was when I changed everything about the way that I approach nutrition.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful that you did. It's refreshing because there's unfortunately the way that you described the earlier scenario where if you just hit your macros and if you don't, oh, you got to work harder. Like, unfortunately, that is way too common. And so I'm really glad that you put psychology into things, because without a solid mindset, you have no foundation. You have nothing to work off of. Like you said, none of those results are going to be sustainable if you don't have a healthy foundation, which is a healthy mind and a belief system. I think that's another one. So let's talk a little bit more about your, like, within your book. If you want, you do, it's all called the personality diet. So how does someone's personality impact their nutrition? I know you work with training as you were a personal trainer as well. So if you want to speak to that a little bit, but since we're kind of on this topic of nutrition, I'm curious what kind of things you've developed or created through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing, and there's a lot of different layers to this, but at its most basic form, we can look at, personality traits tell us a lot as to what's going on, like your brain chemistry in terms of what motivates you, what are your behavioral tendencies, what are your strengths, weaknesses, what are some things that might be more like internal motivators for you. So generally speaking, most people there's three main drivers for motivation. It's pleasure, it's recognition, or it's security, safety. So if we know different personalities, so if we take like the security or safety side of things, that personality type is typically going to be a little bit more anxious. They're going to be a little bit higher stress individual who likes things that are structured and organized and predictable. So for that person, the reason why they crave organization, repetition, structure, because if I have higher anxiety, one of the ways to help put that at ease is to know what's coming, right? I know my
Mm-hmm.
plan, I know my schedule, I know my
Mm-hmm.
everything that to be expected. So that helps them ease their anxious tendencies. So for that person, that personality type, it helps to have predictability when you're talking about their nutrition. So if I were to say, all right, we're just going to wing it every day, you're just going to eat whatever you want, and just kind of figure out what feels best for you and just kind of send them out and into the wild, so to speak. That's going to create more anxiety. That's going to create more stress. And, it's not going to do them any service. So having some structure and predictability, that goes for training too. That individual likes to know, what am I doing for the next 12 weeks or 16 weeks? They like to
Mm-hmm.
plan as far out in advance as they can, to really keep that like predictability in play. There's other personality types who are more pleasure driven, and by the way, these are all tied to different like neurotransmitter systems, so we can like really get into the weeds with it. But personality types give us insight into neurotransmitter balance, neurotransmitter dominance, which they control everything we do, from like emotions, behavior, muscle contraction, blood flow, digestion. Like neurotransmitters are behind every process in the body. So when we understand personality traits, we understand neurotransmitter dominance. So for an individual who is very pleasure driven, they're going to be more like extroverted, reward seeking, goal oriented, more of that like confident, aggressive personality. Like they need to see progress. They're motivated by seeing results quickly. So, taking kind of like the slow and steady approach for that person, they might lose motivation. They might want to like jump to the next thing and not stay consistent with anything because they're not seeing that progress quickly. They're not getting that buy-in right off the bat. So there's ways
Mm-hmm.
to kind of put things in place so we can cater to that personality type. People like myself, I crave variety. I'm adrenaline dominant. That's the main neurotransmitter system. So if something becomes repetitive, I no longer get that adrenaline release from it, and it becomes boring, and I want to do something else. So I'll get like really into something for a while, and then I lose interest and I have to jump to the next thing, which is why I tried diet after diet after diet,
Mhm.
training after training after training. I used to think there was something wrong with me. It's just my personality type. So the way that I kind of like broke things down after really just like looking through all the research on personality psychology and really like the role that our mindset plays in kind of like overall weight maintenance and having a healthy, relationship with your body and with food. I created kind of a system to be able to identify different personality types and what might help from a nutrition standpoint, from a lifestyle standpoint, from a training standpoint, to essentially make people feel more like themselves and not feel like they're working against their nature. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like you're empowering them and you're helping them to realize they're not broken. They don't have to try to fit their lifestyle into a diet. Instead, they can work with their personality and create a lifestyle around and figuring out what works for them based off of the type of person they are. Like, even as you're describing, like that adrenaline junkie, like that's the person that I have to like give them a new recipe and like give them like, new things to do and like constantly like, there has to be some sort of, I think everyone needs some kind of structure, but they're not the person that like could have the same thing for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and never get bored. Like that's not them.
I
They would
completely
not do
agree.
well on a meal on a like, one of that meal plan that you talked about in the beginning on the back. Not that anyone I think would do well on that. But like that, like, meal plan in the back of that magazine definitely would not work for that person.
Yeah, yeah. I love what you said though about everybody needing some form of structure. I call it, for somebody like myself who needs variety, I call it structured variety. So we're not
Mm,
just like acting, recklessly and throwing things out there and just switching gears all the time. There's intention behind it. So we're making
yeah.
it more of like a practical switch, but it's keeping things exciting. It's keeping things new. Even when it comes to training, and this, I'm just using this as an example because it's easy to conceptualize what I'm talking about. But like if one week I'm doing a bicep curl, and the next week I'm doing a bicep curl with a pause, even though it's basically the same movement, I'm just adding something that may not feel like it's all that different. Just that slight change is getting me the variety that my brain craves,
Yeah.
but I can still progress practically.
I'm really glad that you said that because I was actually one of the questions I was thinking about asking, and maybe we could still talk about it, is like you said, like for that person, they like to, or maybe it was the person before, just in general, that person that likes to see results really quickly because that's what motivates them. I think when I heard that, I almost got a little bit like, what's the word, like triggered because of the sense of like, then does that mean like fast weight loss? I think that's where someone's thinking and almost like validates like their feelings of wanting to lose weight really quickly. Can you elaborate on that a little bit and maybe explain other ways to see progress other than the scale dropping massive amounts to keep you
Yes,
motivated?
definitely. So that is one of the biggest challenges with this personality type, because guess what that person has done for their entire life? They have tried the fast weight loss solution.
Mhm.
And what does that do? That delays your progress. And oftentimes we don't understand that connection. The faster you try to lose weight, the longer it's going to take for you to lose weight. So that's like understanding the basics right there. But that individual who's like, hey, I'm motivated by seeing changes, by seeing my body change, by seeing progress, like I need to get shit done. And they've been down that road a million different times. And it's difficult because now they're coming to you and saying, like, hey, I need to see results, and I need to see results quickly, because then I get that, that buy-in, and I'm motivated and I want to keep doing it. So what we have to do is first understand, like, all right, by continuing to try and like rip the band-aid off and cut calories really low and do a whole bunch of cardio, because most of the time they're also an overworker in the gym. They usually are
Mhm.
like, training 7 days a week and adding extra sessions and thinking that like this is going to expedite progress. Again, it's delaying progress, but sometimes they don't make that connection right away. So we have to like set the stage of, look, if that was going to work, it would have worked by now. But we do want to cater to the way that your brain craves results. So let's actually look at other ways that we can create progress. So one of the things that we can do is, there are people who are typically very competitive and they like to check off a lot of tasks, like feel like they're being challenged, to feel like they have, sometimes they'll be like multitaskers or
Mhm.
overachievers. So it's like, let's see if we can, you know, hit these like step goals, see if we can actually increase your calories and perform better in the gym, and focus on like that side of things and how you feel. And like, if we can get you, eating more, feeling stronger, getting more walks in, and like increasing your steps or whatever. And we give them like some specific goals to achieve. And then
Mhm.
like, it's almost like challenging them a little bit. Like, do you think you can handle that? And their competitive nature is like, yes, of course I can handle that. So there's ways to kind of like, facilitate the change that they want by giving them what they need, but also what their brain craves.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I love that you're giving them a behavior as the goal. You're not giving them a goal that's like, oh, now you need to lose a certain amount of weight, or even like you said, increase calories with the goal of being able to train harder.
Yeah.
Like, I think so many people are like shooting themselves in the foot because they're trying to make like, hit these PRs or get stronger, but they're under fueling or over exercising and not resting enough. And like, it's just not working for them. And I feel like, I'm sure not even just that personality type. I feel like a lot of people probably fall into that category.
Yeah, definitely. Because when you attach to an outcome, like, let's be honest, we can't control how quickly the scale moves or if it moves at all to a certain
Right.
extent. So, if we're attaching to an outcome that's largely out of our control, that's a recipe for failure. That's a recipe for
Yes.
frustration and just feeling like, what am I doing wrong? Well, you might be doing everything right. It's just you're tied to an arbitrary number.
Yeah.
And that's, part of the reason
Or a
why.
timeline.
Or a timeline, exactly. And
Hmm.
part of the reason why I think that macros, it's such a, it's, I have a love-hate relationship, because a lot of times people, they feel like success is being perfect and hitting their macros to the gram, and it gives them something like tangible to be like, I did this. But like, who says that those are the right numbers for you? Who, are we actually listening to your body? Like,
Right.
just because you hit your numbers, but like, what if you were ravenously hungry and you were just like, oh, well, I hit my macro, so I'm successful. But hey, your body is sending a clear signal that maybe this isn't the right fit. So anytime we get so focused to the numbers, I think that that's a slippery slope. So I think
Hmm.
utilizing things like, is your energy improving? Are you sleeping better? Or do you have these, behavioral habits that you feel good about doing? And then like attaching to more of a, behavioral driven outcome versus just a numerical outcome.
Yeah, love that. I love that. So you touched on it a little bit, like kind of just now, and like even a little bit before, kind of talking about how the calories in versus calories out method was something that you really preached in the beginning. And I don't want to confuse people listening, because I think to a certain extent, calories do matter, right? Um, but I don't want to speak too much to it. I want you to speak to why you feel like this is a little bit short-sighted.
Yeah, definitely. So there's no way around it. Like, calories matter. The energy balance is a real thing. We can't ignore the laws of thermodynamics. Having said that, I think we over rotate on the calories in, calories out equation. And
Hmm.
it's been just like, so here's the thing. Any single person who is trying to embark on a weight loss journey, health journey, whatever their goals are, if it's body comp driven, if they want to look better, feel better, typically they've been told at least 1,000 times to just eat less and likely move more. And so, and everyone says, it's just calories in versus calories out. All you have to do is eat less. And it ignores everything that comes along as a side effect of that, from the psychological side effect, which is feeling like a failure when you can't maintain it, which is, feeling like you have to be perfect, which is feeling like, you're not worthy of doing more, eating more, like you have to be taking up less space and eating less food, and all the negative connotations. And from the physiological side of things, metabolic adaptation and downregulating of metabolism and feeling more hunger and cravings and mood instability and lack of energy and reduction in sex drive and, suppressing of immune function, and like the list goes on. So it's like, if we're just focused on the calories, we're missing the point of sustainability. We're missing the point of, is this a lifestyle? Is this something you want to do forever? The whole calories in versus calories out equation is, in my mind, something that should be a very short-term intervention of, we have to understand energy balance, but then after that, let's put all the pieces in place to make sure that this is a sustainable lifestyle and not just a numbers game.
Mm. That's so true. So true. Like you don't want to, it matters, but it doesn't matter as much as all these other things that actually matter. And like, I love what you said. It's good temporarily for some, but also we could also probably argue there's like, I think there's like 50% of the population that are trying to get healthy, fit, fat loss, weight loss, whatever, that have counted every calorie and know it so much that they can't unlearn it. And then they have like 50% of the population that like is like, I don't understand why I'm not losing weight, and they've never counted a cat. They don't understand. They're not portioning. They're not measuring things. So I love what you said about like, it does need to be, there has to be an intervention where we discuss it at some point, whether we're unlearning it or learning it. It has to be that, but it is like literally like a small percentage of the whole equation for sustainable success.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. It's great for awareness. It's great for understanding what's in our food and the choices that we're making and how they impact us. But just like any tool can be used or abused. And that's where I think a lot of people abuse it. And that's why I try to talk to the mindset side of things a lot.
Yeah. But I think I just love the way that you even talk about it, because it's correct. It is a tool, but people think it's a diet. Like they take calories in, calories out, make it a diet. They take macro tracking, make it a diet, but it's a tool. It's a tool to teach you when you're hungry, when you're full, what helps your mood, what helps you sleep better, what helps you increase your libido, what helps you get stronger in the gym. Like it's a tool to help you figure out what works for you, but it's not the thing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think we needed to like drive that point home. If anyone's new to this podcast, welcome. That's something we talk about a lot. Okay, so why don't you share, since we're talking about like we talked a lot about what not to do. What are some ways someone can create a sustainable results in whatever their nutrition is, so that could help them figure out, what would be helpful for them in the long run?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's certain things that I look at as like, let's take the foundation first. When you're trying to build a skyscraper, it can only go as high as the foundation will allow. So I always start with like the most basic thing. And a lot of times people are like, oh, I'm way past the basics. And there's nobody that's way past the basics.
You guys can't see. I've made so many facial expressions, but you guys some of you are watching the audio of the video on YouTube or Instagram, but chances are you're just listening to the audio. He's been saying so many things and I'm cringing because of the thought process behind people who like don't understand things quite. As he's like, people think they're beyond the basis. And I'm like, I know they're not. Like, there's nobody is behind the basis. Even I sometimes have to go back to basics, and I've been doing this for 10 years. And so has Mike. Like, we've been in the game, but just because we know better doesn't mean we always do better.
Exactly. And I think to your point, even people who jump into something like calorie counting, macro counting, they ignore some of the foundational pieces. And that's why it's built on a rocky foundation. So when they do get the results, it often doesn't last, because we always, as humans, we always default back to our habits. That's just human nature. When things get stressful, I like to call them anchors. Like, what's the thing that you can do when life throws you, in 7 million curveballs at once, and you're feeling like you have no control, and things aren't going as planned, and life is always messy and unpredictable. Like, what are the anchors that can carry you through that period where you're still going to get that done? Like, typically we don't have to question whether we're going to brush our teeth every day. Even if life is stressful, we know we're probably going to still brush our teeth, so hopefully. So I look at like the foundation as, what are the things that we can start to build as the anchors, as the foundation that carry us forward. So, some form of activity. We should be moving our bodies. As we evolved, this is what our bodies were created to do, to be active. The sedentary lifestyle is not for us. This is not what we were here to do. So some form of activity. That doesn't have to be strength training. That's great if that's part of it, but really I prefer more low intensity activity. Like, walking is the easiest thing that we can do, and also has some of the best health benefits out there. And usually that's like, what people think, I need the intense, like, give me the CrossFit, give me the Orange Theory. But like, walking, that's too simple. That can really be a game changer for hormonal health, for brain health, just overall, stress release. So that's the first thing, is just some form of activity. And then looking at, nutrition, let's start with quality, eating mostly quality foods. I'm a big believer that nothing should ever be off limits. This is something that I try to instill from a mindset perspective, which is you should give yourself permission to eat whatever you want, whenever you want, in whatever quantity you want, and be okay with that. Because if you give yourself permission, you're not going to have this mindset around good versus bad foods. You're going to start making decisions based off of how they make you feel, which is really the objective. We have strong research to support the fact that one of the biggest predictors for weight gain is dichotomous thinking around food, thinking in terms of good versus bad. Because if I think, oh, this food's bad, I can't eat it, then my brain's going to want it. And typically we see binge episodes overindulging and struggling to stay consistent, and then thinking, oh, well, I just need more discipline. I need more willpower, which is not the case. We just have to remove that way of thinking. So most of the time, quality foods, eating, whole foods, well-balanced meals, and then making sure that there's enough room for flexibility, for enjoyment. No foods are off limits. If I like something and I want to eat it, then by all means, let's go for it. But again, like when we start to put these rules around it, that's when we start to get into trouble. So a lot of people get nervous when I say that, and they're like, well, if I gave myself permission to do that, I would just eat like gallons of ice cream. It's like, maybe, but you would also feel pretty crappy afterwards, and you'd probably think twice about doing that again. But if you think to yourself, I can't have ice cream, that's going to be a pretty rough existence to like never have it again, which is why, when we look at certain dietary protocols and we're like, keto as an example, it's like, are you really going to be able to avoid carbs for the rest of your life? If yes, then maybe, okay, I can see some kind of application, but it's very
making a face again.
Yeah.
I disagree that anybody could ever stick with keto or should, because it's not healthy. It's literally, there's a difference between sustainability and then like just not being healthy. Like you need some dietary fiber in your life. You need like iron and B12 vitamins, like, and things that like folic acid, like you need nutrition.
I'm
sorry.
The more that you're thinking,
we digress.
Yeah. Like this whole idea of like, okay, well, I can't have these things and I just have to white knuckle my way through it. It's not going to work. So those two things I feel like go hand in hand. It's like, first, prioritize quality foods, but then also give yourself permission and stop having so many rules around what you quote unquote can or should eat. And then I look at, certain habits in terms of self-care. And I know it's kind of like a cliche buzzword, but recovery, managing stress, getting quality sleep, like those are things that are always overlooked, and they need to be like, we are overstressed as a society, just in general. I could probably take any person and just like pluck them out of a crowd and safely say that they're overstressed just from our work life and, relationships. And then when we add the whole like dieting lifestyle into it, that's a stress. Under is a stress, and training is a stress. And a lot of people are like, oh yeah, like I'm not stressed. And my stress release and my stress management is through training. It's like, okay, that's actually a stress also. What else do you do for yourself? And, lack of sleep is a big one. So like, let's prioritize recovery, self-care, time to yourself. A simple way that I try to frame it is like, every dose of stress should come along with a dose of recovery. That's an easy way to like conceptualize it. And for for some people that can look different. Not everybody's going to be down for meditation, which is fine. Not everybody's going to be down for journaling, which is fine, but find the things that you can do. And, even if it's 5 minutes where you just have a moment to yourself to either go for a walk, get outside, do some deep breathing, read a book, listen to music, listen to a podcast, something where you're just, you're not always on. So, those are kind of like the basics, drink enough water, that type of thing. But like, let's instill those habits and like hammer them home so they become like brushing your teeth. And when shit hits the fan, you're still going to, get some activity in, you're still going to eat mostly quality foods. Although if you do decide to give yourself permission and eat something that it's not quote unquote the best choice, that's totally fine, because this is what you do most of the time. Consistency is what you do most of the time for a really long period of time. It's not to be confused with perfection. So that's kind of where I start. I feel like I totally like went off on a
but it's so good though. It's so good. And I think the basics are important. Kid, I think what I'm thinking people need to hear is, maybe if you don't mind, maybe explaining a little bit of the science to why. And I don't want to discourage people from doing this. I struggle with this. Like I have a lot of people who love like CrossFit, Orange Theory, high intensity training. And very often I notice they're doing too much of it. And just to the point where I'm like, okay, you know what? Your body's not responding. Let's give you a day off of like, I want you to work out less. And then their body starts to respond to fat loss. But I think people need to hear like the science behind that. I feel like you do a really great job explaining the science in simple terms to help people understand why, exercise is great, but the high intensity training is actually hurting you more than helping you in certain situations.
Yeah. So if we think about like what our metabolism is and really what our body is built for, it's survival. So our metabolism is basically one big stress barometer. It's like I need to read the inputs and outputs and determine, are we in a safe environment? Are we in a threatening environment? Because if you just think back to like, evolution, our survival as a species was threatened pretty frequently. We
Mhm.
ran into a tiger, we had to either run from it, we had to fight it, or we got eaten by it, right? There was the acute stress of, all right, I need to overcome this thing that's in front of me that is life threatening. So anytime, and our bodies don't know the difference of where that stress is coming from. So the stress response in any situation that is perceived as a threat is the same. We see the increase in cortisol, adrenaline, and catecholamines. We see, suppression of the immune system because we need all hands on deck, right? If I'm in a life-threatening situation, all the energy that's going to the immune system is not important. What's important is all energy towards getting out of this life-threatening situation. So
Mhm.
that's why that happens. And then we have, mobilization of stored energy, right? Because again, we might need to run, we might need to fight, increase in noradrenaline, better focus, better blood flow to the muscles, because if I need strength to get out of this situation. So all this entire kind of stress response system is activated anytime it's any source of stress, whether it's actually life threatening or if it's simply going through an Orange Theory workout, because your body senses the stress of that activity. If I'm trying to lift a really heavy weight and I'm getting under a barbell, that weight, that pressure, that stress is being registered as life threatening. So it's the same, your body, activates the same type of response.
Mhm.
Problem occurs when it is not managed with proper recovery and we end up
Right.
in a state of chronic stress. So in an ideal scenario, the stress response is very acute, which is why something like adrenaline, the adrenaline receptors can desensitize very quickly. It's because it was built for this acute scenario. Like the stress is here, we either overcame it or we didn't. There's really
Right.
no, like, that's it. It's activated. It's like that turbo boost, and then it should down regulate and you'd be back to homeostasis ideally. If stress becomes chronic and we're not getting enough recovery, then your body reads that as famine, because
Mhm.
from an evolutionary standpoint, that was really the only chronic stress that we dealt with. It was lack of nutrients coming in. So there's a whole bunch of adaptations that occur as a result. If I want to survive a famine, what is my body going to do? It's going to down regulate my metabolism, because the faster my metabolism is without food coming in, the faster I starve to death. It's going to depress sex hormones, reduce sex hormones, because that's not the time for reproduction. And you're going to see a lot of the same, suppression of immune function, just trying to preserve energy to keep you alive, which is why a lot of people get into this place of feeling like their body is stuck holding on to body fat under periods of chronic stress, because that's what's happening. Your body is
Right.
literally trying to protect you and keep you alive. And as a result, what happens is you can, sometimes people are like, oh, then I started eating and my body was like a sponge. Well, yeah, because your body thought that you were starving and was trying to preserve more energy to prevent future starvation. So when we end up in this situation where high intensity exercise is happening excessively and we're combining that with a calorie deficit and we're combining that with work stress and life stress, well, now
Not
we're in that
sleeping.
not sleeping, now
Yeah.
we're in that chronic stress state. So any way that we can close the stress gap of, maybe it's just dialing back those Orange Theory workouts, a few days, and maybe it's eating more to, not always be in that calorie deficit mode. And
Mhm.
maybe it's just taking more time to relax and get more sleep and wind down. And
Mhm.
whatever we can do to close that gap will be effective in helping you see the changes that you want.
Yeah, I think that was so great. Thank you so much for that. And I think just to add to that, it's like, we're not saying don't train that hard. If you enjoy training that hard and that's part of your goals, it's just making sure that you're recovering as much as hard as you're training. So if
Exactly.
you're going to be increasing your intensity of your workouts like that, or the duration or the frequency or whatever, then you better, then foam roll, sleep, hydrate, eat, like fuel, do all the things. Otherwise, you're really shooting yourself in the foot. Like you're making things harder. You're working harder, not smarter. And with that said, even with all of those things, if you're still feeling stressed and burnt out, then you might need to taper back a bit to give yourself a couple of rest days.
Well said.
Oh my God. So this time is flying. This has been like so great. Is there anything that we didn't talk about or touch on that you thought the listeners might benefit from hearing today?
Yeah, I think the main thing, with the personality type and how all that ties together, really, it's just leaning into your nature and not trying to fight against it, not trying to feel like there's something wrong with you. So understanding if you are that person that is, goal driven, or if you are that person that needs variety, or if you are that person that needs structure, that's all okay. It's, everything comes down to finding what works best for you. So rather than feeling like you're just different or nothing works, maybe just try leaning into those things and seeing if you can come up with a plan that caters to that, versus feeling like, a lot of times we feel like we have to just fit someone else's plan because that's what they told us to do, versus having something that's built specifically for us.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, just to wrap it up and put a bow on it, I would say so many people are looking outward for a plan when really they need to be looking inward. And so use the guidance, get Mike's book, go to his page. His Instagram page, guys, is incredible. Like, you're going to learn so much just by being there, his blog, his website. Use even if you follow me or you're tracking macros or counting calories or whatever, all of our information, they're all tools. They're all things to help guide you. But ultimately, it's up to you to look inward and to pay attention to how you feel to figure out what works best for you.
I love that.
Yeah. So where do people find you? I just talked about your blog, your page, everything, but tell them exactly where they can listen to your podcast, where they can get your book.
Yeah.
Shout out all the things. If you have anything fun going on, tell us where they can get connected to you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And this was such a fun conversation. So thanks again for having me.
You're welcome.
I spend some time on Instagram. It's at coach_Mike_Millner. And then I have my own podcast. It's called Mind Over Macros. So kind of fits along with the theme of today. So anybody can listen to my podcast. And my book, The Personality Diet, is on Amazon. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If anyone wants to take the personality assessment, I have an assessment that'll tell you like what your personality type is. You can go to neurotypetraining.com. It's totally free. It's 100 questions. So you might have to invest 15 to 20 minutes to get through it, but it'll tell you some pretty cool information about yourself, your nutrition, lifestyle, training. So if anybody wants that, you can head over to that page, and I think that covers it.
Amazing. Oh my God. Thank you so much, guys. Definitely go give Mike a follow, get his book, listen to his podcast, take the quiz, all the things. If you're new to this podcast, a new change, I was releasing 3 episodes a week. We are now back to 2. I had to reel it in, get strategic about my self-care. So new episodes are now out Tuesdays and Thursdays. And when you're subscribed, you don't miss a beat. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you're a new listener, if you feel so inclined, if this resonated with you, write a review, give it a 5-star rating, and definitely share this with a friend, or take a screenshot of this episode, share it on your stories, tag me, tag Mike. And yeah, just let us know what you think. I think that's it, right? I think we covered it all. All right. That's it for me today. As always, I'm Toni Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.